Everyone called Ilara the spare daughter, the shadow to her sister's blinding light. But on the day Serafina Vane married the wealthy Viscount, everyone thought Ilara loved. The narrative shattered. Ilara stood alone in the corner of the ballroom, enduring the pitying stares of the British aristocracy, until the silence broke. Julian Thorne, the Duke of Blackwood, a man rumoured to have killed a man in a duel, didn't walk towards the beautiful bride. He walked straight to the forgotten sister. When he leaned down and whispered, "Let them think you're mine," he didn't just start a fake relationship. He ignited a scandal that would expose every dark secret this family tried to bury. This is the story of how the wallflower became the weapon. The smell of hothouse lilies was suffocating. To Ilara Vane, it didn't smell like a celebration. It smelled like a funeral. Standing before the cracked cheval mirror in the nursery, because her bedroom had been commandeered for the bride's extensive trousseau, Ilara adjusted the high collar of her dress. It was a dove-grey silk, turned twice, and remade by her own hands the night before. She had pricked her fingers 3 times sewing the hem, leaving tiny rust-coloured dots on the inside of the fabric where no one would see. "Ilara! For God's sake, bring the pearl pins!" The shriek came from down the hall. Ilara closed her eyes for a second, exhaling a breath she felt she had been holding for 6 months. Then she grabbed the velvet pincushion and ran. In the master suite, Serafina Vane looked like a confection of spun sugar and malice. She was undeniably beautiful. Golden hair, porcelain skin, eyes the colour of a summer sky. She was everything Ilara was not. Ilara was dark-haired, sharp-featured, and possessed a gaze that was often described by her mother as unsettlingly observant. "You're late!" Serafina snapped, snatching the pins. She turned to look at Ilara, her eyes raking over the grey dress. A cruel smirk touched her lips. "Oh, Ellie, you wore that? I suppose it's fitting. You look like part of the stonework. Try not to stand too close to the drapery. The guests might wipe their hands on you." "You look lovely, Serafina," Ilara said, her voice steady. It was the script she had memorized. "I know," Serafina preened, turning back to the mirror. "Arthur will be unable to speak." Arthur. The name twisted a knife in Ilara's gut. Viscount Arthur Penrose. 6 months ago, Arthur had spent every afternoon in the Vanes' library, discussing poetry and agrarian reform with Ilara. They had laughed. He had touched her hand. And then the Vane family finances collapsed. Her father, a man with more gambling debts than sense, needed a bailout. Arthur needed a beauty to hang on his arm to distract from his own lack of political spine. The arrangement was made over brandy. Serafina got the title. Arthur got the trophy. Ilara got the bill for the wedding flowers. "Help me with the veil," Serafina commanded. Ilara stepped forward, her hands shaking slightly as she pinned the delicate lace. Brussels lace, costing more than the estate made in a year, into her sister's golden curls. "Do you think he's happy?" Ilara asked, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Serafina laughed, a sharp, tinkling sound. "Happy? Darling, he's a viscount. He's doing his duty, just as I am. We don't marry for happiness, Ilara. We marry to survive. Something you'll likely never have to worry about. Given, well," she gestured vaguely at Ilara's entire existence. An hour later, Ilara stood in the second pew of the dusty village church. The air was cold and damp. She watched Arthur standing at the altar. He looked pale, sweat beading on his upper lip. When Serafina walked down the aisle, the congregation gasped in admiration. But Ilara saw Arthur's eyes. He didn't look at the bride. For a fleeting, terrified second, his gaze darted to the second pew. He looked at Elara with an expression of profound apology. She looked away. It was too late for apologies. The reception was held at Vane Manor. The ballroom, usually draughty and dim, was transformed by hundreds of beeswax candles and yards of silk ribbon, hiding the peeling paint and water stains. The local gentry mingled with a few London elites Arthur had managed to drag down to the country. Elara spent the first 2 hours managing the crisis. The caterer was drunk. The string quartet was playing too fast. Her father was already slurring his words near the punch bowl. By 10 o'clock, she was exhausted. She retreated to the far corner of the room, partially obscured by a large potted fern. She held a glass of champagne that had gone warm and flat. "Look at her," a voice drifted from a nearby cluster of matrons. Mrs. Gable and Lady Fitzroy. They didn't lower their voices. Poor thing. First, she loses the family fortune, and now she watches her sister marry the man who courted her. Courted is a strong word. Lady Fitzroy sniffed. Arthur Penrose needs a wife who can host a dinner party, not one who reads balance sheets. Seraphina was the only choice. Elara is destined to be the maiden aunt. It's a kindness, really. She's too intense for a husband. Elara gripped the stem of her glass so hard she feared it might snap. She wasn't sad anymore. She was angry. A cold, hard anger that settled in her marrow. She wanted to scream at them. She wanted to tell them that she was the one who negotiated the lease on the tenant farms to pay for the champagne they were guzzling. She turned to leave, desperate for fresh air, when the room's atmosphere shifted. It wasn't a sound. It was a sudden drop in pressure. The double doors at the far end of the ballroom opened. A man stepped in. He was tall, dressed in evening blacks that were cut so sharply they made the other men look like they were wearing sacks. He had dark hair, slightly too long for current fashion, and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. Hard angles, a strong jaw, and eyes that were dark and unreadable. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Good heavens," Mrs. Gable whispered, clutching her pearls. "Is that the Duke of Blackwood?" "Julian Thorne?" Lady Fitzroy gasped. "Here. I thought he was in exile after the incident. They say he killed Lord Calloway's brother in a duel over a gambling debt. I heard he seduced the French ambassador's wife. I heard he's bankrupt." Julian Thorne ignored them all. He moved through the crowd like a shark moving through a school of minnows. People parted instinctively, a mix of fear and awe on their faces. He didn't look at the bride. He didn't greet the host. He stopped in the center of the room, scanning the crowd. He looked bored, dangerous, and utterly out of place in the provincial celebration. Then his eyes locked on the corner. On the fern. On Elara. Elara froze. She had never met the Duke, though she knew the rumors. He owned the vast estate bordering the north of their county, Blackwood Hall, a place of Gothic spires and locked gates. He began to walk, not toward the head table, but toward her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Move," she told herself. "Run!" But she was rooted to the spot. He stopped 2 feet in front of her. Up close, he was overwhelming. He smelled of tobacco, sandalwood, and the crisp night air. His eyes were not black, as she had thought, but a deep, startling indigo. And they were tired. He looked down at her, taking in the grey dress, the lack of jewellery, the defiance in her chin. "You look like you're contemplating murder," he said. His voice was a deep baritone, vibrating in the floorboards. Elara blinked. "I beg your pardon." "The way you're looking at the groom," the Duke said, tilting his head slightly. "Or perhaps the bride. You look like you want to burn this room down." Elara straightened her spine. "I was merely observing the architecture, Your Grace." A corner of his mouth quirked upward. "Liar. You're Elara Vane, the clever one. I am the unmarried one, if that is what you mean. I know exactly what I mean." He stepped closer, invading her personal space. The whispers in the room reached a fever pitch. Everyone was watching. Serafina had stopped dancing. Arthur was staring, his mouth agape. "They are eating you alive," Julian murmured, his eyes scanning the gossiping matrons behind her. "They pity you. I detest pity." "Don't you?" "I don't need your help," Elara hissed, though her cheeks burned. "I think you do. And I need something too." He lowered his voice to a rough whisper, leaning down until his lips were inches from her ear. The heat of his breath sent a shiver down her spine. "I need a shield, Elara. The vultures are circling me, trying to marry off their daughters to my title before the season ends. I need a distraction. You need to save your pride." He pulled back slightly, his indigo eyes locking onto hers with intensity that made her knees weak. "Dance with me. Let them think you're mine. By morning, you won't be the pitied spinster. You'll be the woman who captured the Dark Duke. And I will be left alone by every debutante in Hampshire." Elara looked at Serafina, who looked furious that the attention had shifted. She looked at Arthur, who looked jealous. She looked at Mrs. Gable, who looked like she was choking. Elara Vane made a decision. "One dance," she whispered. Julian Thorne smiled. It was a terrifying, beautiful thing. "Let them stare," he said. And he held out his hand. When Elara placed her hand in Julian's, the shock of it was electric. His hand was large, engulfed in a white kid glove, but the grip was firm and warm. He didn't pull her. He guided her, leading her out from behind the fern and into the center of the polished floor. The string quartet, sensing the shift in the room's gravity, faltered for a moment before transitioning into a Strauss waltz. "Breathe," Julian commanded softly, his hand settling on her waist. It felt heavy there, possessive. "If you look like a terrified deer, they won't believe it. Look at me like you know a secret." "I don't know any secrets," Elara murmured, trying to find her footing as he swept her into the turn. She was a competent dancer, but Julian was exceptional. He moved with a predatory grace that made the waltz feel less like a dance and more like a duel. "Then make one up," he countered. "Look at my cravat. Imagine you tied it for me." Elara felt a flush rise from her neck to her hairline. "That is improper, Your Grace." "That is the point, Miss Vane." They spun. The room blurred into streaks of candlelight and pastel silks. For the first time in her life, Elara felt the center of gravity shift toward her. She saw the faces as they passed. Serafina's face was a mask of frozen shock. The bride was accustomed to being the sun. She did not know how to handle an eclipse. Beside her, Arthur looked as though he had swallowed a lemon. His eyes tracked Julian's hand on Elara's waist with a mixture of confusion and misery. "Why me?" Elara asked, keeping her voice low. "There are a dozen beautiful women in this room who would kill to be in this position." "Beautiful women are boring," Julian said dismissively, "and they talk too much. You, I have observed, value silence, and you have a reputation for intelligence. If I am to feign interest in a woman, I'd prefer one who can calculate the odds of me tolerating her presence for more than 5 minutes." "You've observed me?" Elara frowned. "We've never met." "I know you manage the Vane accounts," he said, spinning her again, tighter this time. "I know you negotiated the sale of the timber from the West Woods to the railway company last autumn. You got a price 3 shillings higher per foot than I did for my own timber." Elara's eyes widened. "You knew about that?" "I made it my business to know who outsmarted my steward. I assumed it was your father until I met him. The man can barely count cards, let alone calculate lumber yields. It had to be you." It was necessary, Ilara said defensively. We needed the money. And now you need a reputation. Julian pulled her closer as the music swelled. Smile, Ilara. Arthur is watching. She didn't want to smile, but she looked over Julian's shoulder and saw Arthur stepping forward, as if to cut in. The audacity of him. He had married her sister 3 hours ago, and now he wanted to claim rights to Ilara's time. She looked up at Julian and offered him a brilliant, sharp smile. Is this convincing enough? Deadly, Julian grinned. When the music stopped, Julian didn't release her immediately. He held her hand a fraction of a second too long, bringing it to his lips. He didn't kiss the air above her knuckles, as was proper. He pressed his lips firmly against the glove, his eyes holding hers. Dinner tomorrow, he said, loud enough for the nearby circle to hear. I'll send the carriage for you at 7. Ilara stammered, realizing this wasn't just a one-dance arrangement. I should check my calendar. Cancel whatever is in it. He bowed, low and mocking, to the room at large, and then turned and walked out as abruptly as he had arrived. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the dam broke. Ilara. It was her mother, Lady Vane, bustling forward in a rustle of purple taffeta. Her face, usually pinched with worry over debts, was glowing with a terrifying hope. Ilara, darling, why didn't you tell us? The Duke of Blackwood. Mother, it's not. Don't be coy. Mrs. Gable appeared at her other elbow, her earlier cruelty forgotten. He's the most eligible bachelor in England, despite the colourful history. And he looked at you as if you were the only woman in the world. Ilara felt trapped. She looked for an escape, but the wall of people was impenetrable. Excuse me. The voice was Arthur's. He pushed through the crowd, his face flushed. He grabbed Ilara's arm, perhaps a bit too roughly. Ilara, a word. In the library. Now. Arthur, really? Is this the time? Serafina appeared, linking her arm through Arthur's and glaring at Ilara. The cake is being cut. It will wait, Arthur snapped at his new bride. He dragged Ilara toward the library doors. Once inside the dimly lit room, the same room where they had read poetry only months ago, Arthur released her. He paced the rug, running a hand through his thinning hair. What are you doing, Ilara? I believe I was dancing, she said, rubbing her arm. And you are hurting me. With him? Arthur turned, his eyes wide. Julian Thorne is a monster. Do you know the rumours? He's dangerous. He's cold. He's not like us. And what are we, Arthur? Ilara asked quietly. Desperate. Cowardly. Arthur flinched. I did what I had to do, for my family, for the title. And so you married Serafina. I couldn't marry you, Arthur burst out. My father, the debts. I needed the dowry, even if it was small, and the connection. Serafina is the beauty of the county. People expect a viscount to marry a diamond. And I am just a lump of coal. You are my best friend, Arthur said, his voice cracking. He reached for her hand. Ilara, you are the only person who understands me. I can't bear to see you with him. He'll ruin you. He's playing a game. And you aren't? Ilara pulled her hand away. You want me to stay the spinster aunt, Arthur? You want me to sit in the corner and watch you raise children with my sister and pine for you? Is that how you keep your conscience clean? Arthur fell silent. The truth hung heavy in the air. The Duke offered me respect, Ilara lied, which is more than you offered me when you proposed to my sister without even telling me first. He doesn't love you, Arthur sneered, his petty nature surfacing. Men like him don't fall for women like you. Let them think what they want, Ilara said, echoing Julian's words. "I am going to bed. Give my regards to your wife." She walked out of the library, her heart pounding. She had burned the bridge with Arthur. She was alone again. Or she would have been, had she not found a small, cream-coloured card tucked into the sash of her dress. She didn't know how it got there. Julian must have slipped it in during the dance. She waited until she was in the safety of the nursery to read it. In sharp, angular script, it read, "The wolves are confused. Step 1 is complete. I have a proposition regarding the Vane estate ledger. Bring the books tomorrow." Blackwood. Ilara stared at the card. He didn't just want a fake courtship. He wanted the ledgers. He knew about the financial ruin. A chill went through her. Was this a rescue or a blackmail? She went to the window and looked out toward the north, where the dark silhouette of Blackwood Hall cut against the moon. "Let them think you're mine," she whispered to the empty room. She touched her lips where he had kissed her hand. For the first time in her life, Ilara Vane was not afraid of the dark. She was curious about what lived in it. Part 3 will see Ilara arriving at Blackwood Hall, where the terms of their arrangement become much more complicated, and a dark secret about the Duke's finances is revealed. Would you like me to continue with parts 3 and 4? The carriage ride to Blackwood Hall felt less like a social call and more like a transport to the gallows. The Vane family carriage was rickety, smelling faintly of mildew, but the vehicle Julian had sent was an impeccably sprung black barouche upholstered in sapphire velvet, drawn by 4 horses whose combined value likely exceeded Ilara's entire dowry. Ilara clutched the heavy, leather-bound estate ledger to her chest. Her mother had nearly fainted when Ilara announced she was dining with the Duke. Serafina had broken a teacup in sheer spite. Arthur had ridden over, pale and frantic, begging her not to go, which only hardened Ilara's resolve. As the carriage passed through the towering wrought-iron gates of Blackwood Park, the atmosphere shifted. The air felt cooler, the trees older and denser. The hall itself was a sprawling Gothic monstrosity of blackened stone. Gargoyles perched on eaves like vultures waiting for a meal. It was magnificent and terrifying. She was met at the door not by a butler, but by Julian himself. He wore a velvet smoking jacket the colour of Burgundy wine, looking relaxed and utterly in command of his domain. "You brought it," he said, his eyes dropping to the ledger in her arms. No greeting, no pleasantries. "You commanded it," Ilara replied coolly, stepping inside. The entry hall was cavernous, lit by a chandelier the size of a small carriage. The wealth displayed here was not the desperate fading gilt of her own home. It was deep, ancient, and inexhaustible. "I invited you to dinner, Ilara. The ledger was merely the price of admission." He took the heavy book from her, his fingers brushing hers. His hands were warm. "Come. We are dining in the library. The dining hall is too draughty for 2. The library was a 2-story haven of dark wood and the smell of old paper and leather. A small table was set by a roaring fire. The meal was exquisite, roasted quail and truffle soup, but Ilara could barely taste it. She watched Julian, who ate with an appetite that suggested he didn't care what anyone thought of him. "Why am I here, Your Grace?" Ilara put down her spoon. "And please, do not insult my intelligence by pretending it is for my sparkling conversation." Julian poured himself a glass of dark red wine. He leaned back, studying her over the rim of the glass. The firelight cast dancing shadows across the sharp angles of his face, making him look almost demonic. "Direct. I like that." "Very well, Ilara. I did some digging after our delightful waltz last night. I was curious about the woman who could turn a profit on the Vane estate when it has been bleeding money for a decade. He tapped the ledger sitting on a nearby desk. Your father is a fool. He's gambled away 3 generations of wealth. Tell me something I don't know, Ilara countered bitterly. He hopes Arthur's political connections will secure a government loan. Julian laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Arthur Penrose couldn't secure a loan for a pack of cards. He's as leveraged as your father. Why do you think he married your sister? He needed the prestige of the Vane name to keep his creditors at bay for another year. The room spun slightly. Ilara felt sick. They are both broke. Destitute is the preferred term. It's a house of cards, darling. Serafina married a sinking ship, thinking it was a lifeboat. Ilara stared into the fire. All the sacrifice. Serafina giving up her freedom, Arthur giving up. Whatever he felt for Ilara, it was all for nothing. And where do you fit into this tragedy? She whispered. Julian stood up and walked to the desk, resting his hand on the ledger. I am the ocean they are sinking in. I own the mortgages on Penrose Park. And, as of 3 days ago, I bought the outstanding debts of your father from his various London creditors. Ilara shot out of her chair. You own us. I own the roof over your head, the land under your feet, and the bed your sister is currently sharing with her useless husband. Yes. His voice was devoid of emotion. It was just business. Why? She breathed. Because I need leverage. He turned to face her. The playful mask he had worn at the wedding was gone. This was the dark duke the rumors spoke of, cold, calculating, and ruthless. My life is currently untenable. My return to England has stirred up complications. There are families who feel I owe them blood. There are mothers trying to throw their daughters into my bed to secure my title. I need a shield. A very specific kind of shield. He walked toward her, stopping only when the hem of her dress brushed his boots. I need a fiancée, Ilara. A respectable woman from an old family who is smart enough to play a part and desperate enough not to ask questions. In return, I will hold the debt on Vane Manor and Penrose Park. Your parents and your sister will not be turned out into the street. Ilara felt trapped. He had orchestrated this perfectly. He had seen her vulnerability at the wedding and pounced. It's a business arrangement, she clarified, her voice shaking. A fake engagement. Precisely. We will go to London for the season. We will attend balls. I will buy you expensive dresses and glare at any man who looks at you. You will gaze adoringly at me and pretend I am not the monster everyone says I am. At the end of the season, we will stage an amicable break. Perhaps you find my past too troubling, and you will walk away with a settlement large enough to ensure you never have to marry for money. It was the perfect solution. It saved her family. It gave her independence. And what if I refuse? Then I call in the debts tomorrow. Your father goes to debtor's prison. Serafina and Arthur lose everything. He shrugged. Your choice, Miss Vane. He wasn't asking. He was putting a gun to her head. Ilara looked into his indigo eyes. There was no softness there, only the hard calculation of a man used to getting what he wanted. But beneath it, she sensed something else. A profound loneliness. He was building walls out of other people to protect himself. Very well, Ilara said, lifting her chin. But I have conditions. His eyebrows shot up. Conditions? You are hardly in a position to negotiate. I am the only woman in Hampshire who wasn't trembling when you walked into that ballroom. You need me specifically because I am not afraid of you. My condition is this. You do not treat me like an employee. In public, I am yours. In private, we are equals. And you tell me the truth about why you need this shield, the real reason, not just complications." Julian stared at her for a long, tense moment. The fire popped loudly in the grate. He seemed to be weighing her soul against his secrets. Slowly, a genuine smile spread across his face. It didn't make him look less dangerous. It made him look thrilling. "God, you are magnificent," he murmured. He reached out and took her hand, bowing over it. But this time, his lips lingered on her skin, sending a jolt of heat straight to her core. "Deal. Welcome to the devil's bargain, my future Duchess." London during the season was a battlefield, perfumed with lavender water and desperation. But for Elara Vane, arriving on the arm of the Duke of Blackwood, it was a coronation. Julian had been true to his word. He had outfitted her in a wardrobe that made Seraphina's trousseau look like rags. Silks in deep emeralds, sapphire blues, and charcoal greys, colours that emphasized her pale skin and dark hair, making her look striking rather than merely pretty. They were the scandal of the city, the reclusive duke and the spinster sister. Their first major appearance was Lady Jersey's opening ball at Almack's. The moment they appeared at the top of the stairs, the music literally stopped. 300 heads turned. Elara felt a tremor of nerves, but Julian's hand on her arm was steadying, his grip possessive. "Chin up, darling," he whispered against her hair, loudly enough for the nearest dowagers to hear. They're only staring because they've never seen perfection before. Elara suppressed a snort. "You are absurd," she whispered back. "I am charmingly devoted. There is a difference. Now smile. Seraphina is over by the punch bowl, looking like she's swallowed a toad." Elara looked. Indeed, her sister was there, dressed in pale pink, looking washed out beside the vibrant crush of the London elite. Arthur was beside her, looking miserable as usual. When Seraphina saw Elara, her eyes narrowed into slits of pure venom. Julian led Elara onto the dance floor for the first waltz. They moved together flawlessly now. In the week since the deal was struck, they had practiced, not just dancing but being together. He had taught her how to read the room, which powerful men were tottering near bankruptcy, whose mistresses were wearing whose jewels. "The fat man in the red waistcoat at 3 o'clock, Julian murmured as they spun. "Lord Avery. He owes me £5,000. Watch how he bows when we pass." They passed, Lord Avery nearly bent in half. Elara felt a strange thrill. It was intoxicating, wielding his power by proxy. For years she had been invisible. Now she was formidable. But the act was exhausting. In private, in the carriage rides home, or in the drawing room of his massive London townhouse, where she was staying, properly chaperoned by a deaf elderly aunt Julian had hired for appearances, things were complicated. They sparred. They argued about politics and literature. He respected her mind in a way Arthur never really had. Arthur liked that she agreed with him. Julian liked that she challenged him. Yet he kept his side of the bargain regarding his secrets. He remained closed off. When she pushed about the duel, or his years abroad, the shutters came down over his indigo eyes. The real danger, however, wasn't emotional. It was walking toward them across the ballroom floor later that evening. The crowd parted for a man who looked hauntingly like Julian, but with none of the granite hardness. He was fair-haired, slender, with a face that would have been angelic if not for the burning hatred in his eyes. "Julian," the man sneered, stopping them as they left the dance floor. "I heard the prodigal demon had returned. And with a hostage, I see." He raked his eyes over Elara disrespectfully. Julian went horrifyingly still. His hand on Elara's waist tightened until it was painful. "Lord Harrington," Julian said, his voice dropping to a glacial temperature Ilara hadn't heard before. "This is Miss Vane, my intended. You will speak to her with respect, or you will not speak at all." Harrington laughed, a brittle sound. "Your intended? Does she know, I wonder? Does she know that the Blackwoods destroy everything they touch? Does she know about the blood on your hands, Julian?" "Thomas," Julian warned, taking a step forward, physically shielding Ilara. "Walk away. Now." "My brother is dead because of you," Harrington spat, his voice rising, drawing the attention of the entire room. "And you parade around London as if you own the place. You think a pretty new toy will make us forget?" He turned his fury on Ilara. "You're a fool, girl. He killed my brother in cold blood over a game of cards. He's a murderer. And when he's done using you to polish his reputation, he'll discard you like garbage. Ask the French ambassador's wife." The room was deathly silent. Every eye was on Ilara, waiting for her reaction. This was the test. This was why Julian needed her. Ilara felt fear. Yes, the hatred radiating from Harrington was palpable. But looking at Julian's rigid back, she realized something. He wasn't attacking. He was defending. He was bracing for impact. She stepped out from behind Julian. She placed her hand gently on his forearm, a public display of ownership and comfort. She looked Thomas Harrington directly in the eye. Her voice was clear, calm, and carried through the silent ballroom. "I am well aware of the Duke's history, Lord Harrington. Unlike you, I do not rely on gossip to form my opinions of men, and I find your attempt to bully me in a public setting far more indicative of bad character than anything His Grace has ever done." She felt Julian let out a breath beside her. Harrington looked as if she had slapped him. He opened his mouth, sputtered, and found he had no retort to her calm demeanor. The crowd murmured. They were on Ilara's side. She had handled the situation with the poise of a duchess, twice her age. "Come along, darling," Ilara said to Julian, tugging gently on his arm. "The air in here has suddenly become quite stale." They walked away, leaving Harrington fuming in their wake. They didn't speak until they were in the carriage. The deaf aunt was asleep in the corner. Julian stared out the window, his jaw working. Finally, he turned to look at her. The streetlights cast intermittent flashes of light on his face, revealing an expression of raw vulnerability she had never seen. "You defended me," he said, sounding genuinely stunned. "That was the deal, was it not?" Ilara replied, her heart still pounding. "To let them think I am yours." "No one has ever—" He stopped, swallowing hard. He looked away, then back at her with intense intensity. "Harrington will not let this go. He is weak, but his mother is venomous. They will try to hurt you to get to me." "I can handle myself, Julian. I know you can." He reached across the carriage and took her hand. He didn't just hold it. He laced his fingers through hers, a gesture far more intimate than their public displays. "But you shouldn't have to. I'm sorry he confronted you." "Was it true?" she asked quietly. "Did you kill his brother in cold blood?" Julian squeezed her hand tight. "It was a duel. It was legal. But it was not. It was not as simple as they say." He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. Fear that she would believe the monsters. "I want to tell you," he whispered. "Everything. But if I do, Ilara, this arrangement, it might become very real. And that would be the most dangerous thing of all." Ilara looked at their joined hands. She knew she should pull away. She should keep the professional distance they agreed upon. But she didn't want to. "Tell me," she said. The carriage ride was silent, but the air inside crackled with a tension that had nothing to do with the cold London rain drumming against the roof. When they arrived at Blackwood House, Julian didn't send her to her room. He dismissed the servants, poured 2 glasses of amber brandy, and gestured for her to sit in the library. He paced the length of the Persian rug, shedding his coat, looking like a caged tiger. Finally, he stopped and looked at her. "Sebastian Harrington," Julian began, his voice rough, "was a cheat. But that isn't why I killed him." Ilara took a sip of the brandy. It burned pleasantly, fortifying her. "Go on." Sebastian had a taste for young women who couldn't say no. He preyed on governesses, maids, the daughters of tenants, women with no voice. 2 years ago, he set his sights on my ward, Clara. Ilara's eyes widened. She didn't know he had a ward. Clara is the daughter of my late regiment commander. She was 17. Sebastian cornered her in the garden during a masquerade. She escaped, but barely. When I found out, I didn't challenge him to a duel immediately. I went to his father, Lord Harrington. I showed him the proof. Letters Sebastian had written, testimonies from other women. Julian's hand clenched around his glass until his knuckles turned white. "And?" Ilara asked softly. And his father laughed. He said boys will be boys, and that if I made a scene, he would ruin Clara's reputation. He would claim she seduced Sebastian. In our world, the woman always pays the price. Ilara felt a cold fury rising in her chest. She knew that truth all too well. "So," Julian continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, "I realized the law wouldn't stop him. Society wouldn't stop him. So I provoked him. I publicly insulted his honor at the card table, accused him of marking cards, which he was, so he would be forced to challenge me. That way, the choice of weapon was mine." "Pistols," Ilara guessed. "Yes, at dawn. He fired before the count. He was a coward to the end. The bullet grazed my rib. I didn't miss." He drained his glass in one swallow and looked at Ilara, bracing himself for her judgment. "I killed a man to stop a predator, but to protect Clara's name, I never told anyone the reason. I let them think it was over a gambling debt. I let them call me a murderer so that Clara could have a future." The silence in the room was heavy. Ilara stood up. She walked across the rug, closing the distance between them. Julian watched her, his body tense, expecting her to recoil. Instead, she reached out and placed her hands on his face. His skin was rough with stubble, his jaw tight. "You are not a monster, Julian," she whispered, fierce and low. "You are a martyr." He closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against hers. A shudder went through his massive frame. "I am tired, Ilara. I have been alone in this darkness for 2 years. Until you." The air shifted. The emotional intimacy suddenly flared into physical attraction, so potent it made Ilara dizzy. He opened his eyes, indigo burning into brown. His hands came up to grip her waist, pulling her flush against him. "You should go to your room," he rasped, his voice vibrating against her skin. "Because if you stay here another minute, I am going to forget the terms of our contract." "The contract?" Ilara murmured, her hands sliding into the hair at the nape of his neck. "I believe Clause 4 stated we must be convincing." "We are in private, Ilara." "I don't care." He kissed her. It wasn't tentative. It was a collision. He kissed her with the desperation of a drowning man finding air. Ilara responded with equal force, all the anger and passion she had suppressed for years pouring into him. It was messy and hot and real. For a moment, the world of debts, societal vipers, and false engagements ceased to exist. There was only the heat of his hands, the taste of brandy and desire, and the realization that Ilara Vane was hopelessly, catastrophically in love with the Duke of Blackwood. He pulled back, breathing hard, his forehead resting against hers. "Ilara, your grace." The door to the library banged open. They sprang apart, Elara smoothing her dress, Julian turning with a snarl to face the intruder. It was Julian's valet, looking pale and terrified. "Forgive me, Your Grace," the man stammered, averting his eyes. "But a rider just arrived from Hampshire. It's urgent." He held out a letter. It wasn't addressed to Julian. It was addressed to Elara. Elara's hands shook as she broke the seal. It was Serafina's handwriting, but it was frantic, ink blotched, as if she had been crying while writing. "Elara, come home. Immediately. Arthur has done something terrible. The bailiffs are here. Father has collapsed. They say we have to leave Vane Manor by Friday. Please, you are the only one who can fix this." Elara looked up, the blood draining from her face. "I have to go. Tonight." Julian snatched the letter from her hand, scanning it. His face hardened into granite. "Get the carriage," he ordered the valet, "and pack my trunks." "You don't have to come," Elara said, panic rising in her voice. "This is my family's mess. You've done enough." "Elara," he said, grabbing her shoulders and forcing her to look at him. The tenderness of the kiss was gone, replaced by the resolve of a general going to war. "You are my intended. An attack on your family is an insult to me. And if Arthur Penrose has betrayed you, he will answer to me." "It's not just Arthur," Elara realized, a sick feeling settling in her gut. "The Harringtons. Lord Harrington said he would hurt me to get to you. This is it." "Then let them come," Julian growled. "I didn't kill the brother just to let the father win." They arrived at Vane Manor at dawn. The estate, usually sleepy and quiet, was in chaos. 2 large wagons were parked in the driveway, and rough-looking men were carrying furniture out of the front door. Elara jumped from the carriage before it fully stopped, gathering her skirts and running up the steps. Julian followed, his presence dark and ominous. Inside, the drawing room was a scene of devastation. Her mother was weeping on a settee that was being tagged for auction. Her father was slumped in a chair, looking grey and lifeless, a doctor attending to him. Serafina stood by the window, looking haggard, her beauty dimmed by sleeplessness and terror. "Stop this!" Elara screamed, her voice echoing off the peeling walls. "Stop it immediately!" The bailiffs paused, looking toward the door. When they saw the Duke of Blackwood standing behind Elara, they froze. "Who authorized this?" Julian demanded, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I did." Arthur Penrose stepped out from the shadows of the hallway. He looked terrible, eyes bloodshot, clothes rumpled, but there was a manic, defiant gleam in his eyes. "Arthur?" Elara stared at him. "What have you done?" "I saved myself," Arthur said, his voice trembling. "And I exposed a fraud." He pointed a shaking finger at Elara. "You and your paramour. You think you can parade around London, playing the high and mighty Duchess, while we rot here?" "I know the truth, Elara. I know about the contract." Elara felt the blood freeze in her veins. "What are you talking about?" Julian stepped forward, shielding Elara. "I found the letter," Arthur sneered. "The one you wrote to your solicitor in London, outlining the terms of the arrangement. You left a draft in the library before you left. Careless, Elara." It was a lie. Elara knew she hadn't left anything. "He's lying," Elara said, looking at Serafina. "Serafina, you know I wouldn't—" "It doesn't matter," Arthur shouted. "I took the letter to Lord Harrington. He was very interested to learn that the Duke's engagement was a sham designed to hide his financial vulnerability." Julian went very still. "My financial vulnerability?" "Everyone knows the Blackwood estate is cash poor," Arthur said, parroting words that clearly weren't his own. "Harrington offered to buy my debts, and the Vane debts, if I gave him the proof of your deception. He owns Vane Manor now, and he's calling the loans immediately. Unless what? Elara asked. Unless the Duke signs over the deed to the West Woods, Arthur finished. Elara gasped. The West Woods, the timberland. It's not about the scandal, Elara realized, turning to Julian. It's about the railway. The new line is going through the West Woods. That land is going to be worth millions next year. Harrington doesn't care about your reputation, Julian. He wants the fortune the railway will bring. Julian looked at Arthur with profound disgust. You sold your wife's home and your own integrity for a railway deal? I had no choice, Arthur cried. Harrington threatened to ruin me. So you ruined us instead, Serafina said. Her voice was cold. She walked over to Arthur. For a second, it looked like she might comfort him. Instead, she slapped him across the face with a force that cracked through the room. You coward! You pathetic, spineless little worm! Serafina, get out, she hissed. Get out of my house. It's not your house anymore, Arthur yelled, holding his cheek. It belongs to Lord Harrington. Actually, Julian interrupted, checking his pocket watch. It doesn't. All eyes turned to the Duke. He looked bored. You see, Arthur, while you were busy playing spy, I was busy being a duke. I don't write letters to solicitors about sensitive matters. I have them come to me. That draft you found was a fabrication planted by my valet because I suspected you were opening Elara's mail. Elara looked at Julian, stunned. You knew? I suspected, Julian corrected. Arthur is a weak man. Weak men are predictable. I knew Harrington would try to use him. Julian walked over to the head bailiff, who was holding a clipboard. Who holds the note on this property as of this morning? Julian asked. Lord Harrington, Your Grace. The paperwork was filed yesterday. Incorrect, Julian said. He pulled a folded document from his inner coat pocket. Harrington tried to file the paperwork, but he forgot that the Vane estate is entailed. The debts cannot be sold to a third party without the consent of the primary lien holder. And who is the primary lien holder? Arthur asked, his voice squeaking. I am. Julian smiled, showing all his teeth. I bought the primary mortgage 3 weeks ago, Arthur. Remember? I told Elara I owned the roof over her head. I meant it literally. He handed the document to the bailiff. This house belongs to me. The Vane family are my tenants. If Lord Harrington wants to evict them, he'll have to evict me. And I am very hard to move. The bailiff read the document, paled, and signalled his men. Put the furniture back, lads. Mistaken the paperwork. Arthur stood trembling, his entire gambit collapsing. He looked at Elara, searching for pity. He found none. Leave, Arthur, Elara said quietly. Go to your empty house. Serafina stays here. Arthur fled. When the door closed, the adrenaline crashed. Elara's mother sobbed in relief. Serafina sank onto a chair, burying her face in her hands. Elara turned to Julian. He looked exhausted. You bought the house? She asked. 3 weeks ago. Why didn't you tell me? Because, Julian said, lowering his voice so only she could hear. I wanted you to trust me for who I am, not for what I could buy. I do trust you, she said. Your Grace. It was the valet again, running in from the carriage outside. He looked sicker than he had in London. What is it now? Julian snapped. It's the police, Your Grace. They are coming up the drive. Lord Harrington is with them. On what grounds? Julian demanded. I just proved the debt is mine. It's not about the debt, sir, the valet whispered, his eyes darting to Elara. They have a warrant for Miss Vane's arrest. Arrest? Elara stepped back. For what? For embezzlement, the valet said. Harrington claims he has proof that you doctored the Vane estate ledgers for 5 years to defraud investors. He has a witness. Arthur Penrose. The room went silent. It was the ultimate betrayal. Arthur, humiliated and ruined, had decided that if he couldn't have the money, he would destroy the woman who made him look like a fool. Julian stepped in front of Ilara. They will not touch her. Julian, Ilara grabbed his arm. If I am arrested, the scandal, it will confirm everything Harrington said about us. It will ruin your chance to clear your name. It will drag Clara into this. I don't care about my name, Julian roared, losing his composure for the first time. I care about you. The heavy thud of the door knocker echoed through the house. Open up, in the name of the king. Julian looked at Ilara. His eyes were wild, desperate. I can get you out the back. My carriage is faster. I can get you to the coast, to France. Run? Ilara shook her head, tears spilling over. If I run, I admit guilt. I won't do that. I won't live in the shadows like you had to. She squeezed his hand hard, then let go. Ilara, no. She walked to the door and opened it. Lord Harrington stood there, a triumphant smirk on his face, flanked by 2 constables. Behind them, cowering by a horse, was Arthur. Miss Ilara Vane, the constable said. You are under arrest for fraud and grand larceny. Ilara held her head high. I am innocent. Tell it to the magistrate, Harrington sneered. Take her. As the handcuffs clicked around Ilara's wrists, Julian lunged forward. It took 3 men to hold him back. I will burn your world down, Harrington, Julian screamed, struggling against the guards. I will kill you for this. You already killed one of my sons, Blackwood, Harrington replied coldly. Now watch me kill your future. They dragged Ilara toward the police wagon. She looked back one last time. Julian was not fighting anymore. He was standing perfectly still, watching her, his face a mask of terrifying, cold resolve. He wasn't a lover anymore. He was the Dark Duke, and he was planning a war. Julian turned the book toward the magistrate. Next to every entry, Arthur Penrose signed his initials to acknowledge receipt. He thought he was just signing a logbook. He didn't realize Ilara was building a receipt trail. The magistrate adjusted his spectacles, peering at the book. These do appear to be Mr. Penrose's signature. But where did the money go? Julian continued, turning to the gallery. Arthur didn't invest it. He didn't pay club fees. I took the liberty of hiring a forensic accountant from the Bank of England. We traced the bank notes. Julian pointed a long finger at Lord Harrington. Arthur Penrose has been paying blackmail to Lord Harrington for 3 years, to hide the fact that Arthur has an illegitimate child in France. A child Harrington threatened to expose to Seraphina Vane before the wedding. The courtroom erupted. Seraphina stood up, her face a mask of shock, or perhaps, finally, clarity. Order! The magistrate banged his gavel. Order! This is preposterous, Harrington shouted, his face purple. You are a murderer, Blackwood. No one believes you. They don't have to believe me, Julian said calmly. They just have to believe the bank drafts. He produced a stack of papers, signed by Arthur Penrose, endorsed by Thomas Harrington. The truth hung in the air, undeniable. Arthur had stolen from the Vanes to pay Harrington. When the money ran out, Harrington forced Arthur to marry Seraphina to get access to the Vane assets. When Julian stepped in, their house of cards collapsed, so they tried to frame Ilara. Arrest them, the magistrate ordered, pointing his gavel at Arthur and Harrington. No, it was Harrington. He made me do it, Arthur shrieked as the bailiffs grabbed him. Harrington didn't scream. He just glared at Julian with pure hate as he was led away. Ilara stood in the dock, the cage around her unlocking. She felt lightheaded. It was over. She stepped out onto the floor. The crowd parted for her now, not out of pity, but out of respect. She didn't look at them. She walked straight to Julian. He met her halfway. He looked exhausted, his eyes shadowed, but when he looked at her, the darkness lifted. "You kept the old ledger," she whispered. "I kept everything that belonged to you," he replied. "I told you. You are the clever one. And the illegitimacy? The blackmail? I have my spies," Julian shrugged. And Serafina helped. She found the letters in Arthur's coat. Elara looked back at her sister, who was watching Arthur being dragged away with a look of cold satisfaction. Serafina had finally chosen a side. "Let's go home," Julian said, offering his arm. And as the music drifted out from the ballroom, the Duke of Blackwood didn't walk into the party alone. He walked in with his wife, his equal, and his heart, leaving the shadows behind forever. And that is the story of Elara Vane and the Duke of Blackwood. What started as a desperate act of survival became a legendary romance that brought the corrupt aristocracy to its knees. Elara proved that being the spare daughter didn't mean she was weak. It meant she was watching, learning, and preparing to conquer. I want to know what you think. Did Serafina deserve forgiveness for how she treated Elara in the beginning? And would you have forgiven Arthur? Or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of scandal, revenge, and romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Share this with a friend who loves a good period drama. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next chapter.